What types of legal issues do we see, and what do you need to consider when building and designing a site?
I think one semi-recently that we had, and maybe Adam, you can talk a little bit more to this since you dealt directly with them, but there's the issue of content origination, where you get your content, making sure that you have the rights to that content, and that it's not duplicated across other sites. We had a client come to us kind of in panic mode saying that their site had been, maybe scraped or something. There was, some confusion there. So Adam, could you maybe speak a little bit to just the scenario that can happen with the business around copyright?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, it's more common than anybody would like for it to happen. But when you have a website, especially one that's really putting out a lot of content, there are other sites out there that could scrape that content and put it on theirs. They basically just have a bot kind of viewing either your RSS feed or other certain kind of access points to the site, and will just basically copy your blog word for word onto another one. Now, just because this happens, you should handle it right away, but it's not something to freak out and panic about. Usually these things can be handled pretty quickly. Just through a few steps. First, contacting the content of the site and telling them, please take this content down. This is copyrighted. Like, this is not appropriate to be copying this over to your site. And usually people will follow suit with that. From there, usually there's a hosting provider that's hosting this person's website, and contacting them and discussing it with them is probably the next approach if the owner of that website is not responding to your messages. So really, I'd recommend taking it step by step, making sure not to freak out too much. This stuff does happen, and you usually have the best content on your site, and a much better site than probably whoever's scraping your site will have. Usually they throw these sites up and they look very messy, and it could be solved, but it's something really to keep an eye out for, because not only is that frustrating to have your content being stolen like that, but it will affect your SEO scores and just rankings on Google as well, because sometimes Google can't really tell what's actually the originator, or sees this as basically duplicate and not as highly prioritized content.
So Adam, what notifies you that your content has been duplicated or stolen? That's not something.
There aren't exactly notifications of this, but instead, and Tyler, if you have any tools, chime in, but it's really something that you'll just have to keep an eye out for. Tyler, do you know any tools or thoughts on actually kind of making sure that this isn't happening besides just monitoring Google?
Yeah, Google Webmaster Tools, if your site does get scraped and your Google is identifying that as duplicate content and you receive a penalty, you'll get a notification through Google Webmaster Tools. But usually to get to that scenario, you've got to be in a pretty serious pickle. At which point I would definitely recommend contacting someone and not trying to handle it yourself. But there are other ways. So usually these scrapers, they'll take and copy the entire block of HTML on your site. And that'll usually include your Google Analytics tracking pixel and script, which then you can set up a report for in Google Analytics to look for websites that are reporting back data to your Google Analytics ID that aren't actually your websites. That can be a really great, very easy way to look for that. There are also some services out there that you can pay for that will crawl the internet and look for scraped content. But generally, unless if you're running like a content syndication site or something that you're really investing like seriously heavily into content generation, the cost of those services isn't going to outweigh the benefit to you. So really keeping an eye on Google Webmaster Tools and Google Analytics are going to be your cheapest and easiest ways to keep an eye on that.
Sometimes when you see like a dip of traffic or a change in traffic that you don't expect, sometimes it can be associated with something like that. Maybe people are getting directed to the same piece of content on this other site, for instance. Just on that note on the Google Analytics, Tyler, just with stuff I've seen in the past is it's same with other stuff. Like we actually had a form be scraped and put on another site by accident, and we had discontinued a form and saw an entry come in from to it, but from a different website. Since it's pulling the entire script over, you'll see some odd behavior if there is a bot constantly scraping that, and you just have to make sure to keep your eyes open for that.